Is life fair? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, this is Jill from the Northwoods talking about topics of life, one small step at a time. We're going to make changes, and that we can bring about small changes in our life that have huge impacts into the results we get, into the things that we end up doing. This is the idea. So we might think at times, well, that's not fair. Life is not fair. That's the reality of it. There's it's a blunt reality, and we see it every day. Life is not fair. But here's the twist. Life is not fair, but we're not powerless either. And I'm not gonna go into the fact that I am a Christian and I believe in God's existence in this world and life-changing aspects of prayer and walking in God's path. We're gonna talk about more here is the choices, attitudes, what you put into your body, what you put into your brain, and these opportunities to build something meaningful, even if life is uneven with people. And you see it. I've seen it my whole life that there are people who grew up with lots and got lots more. And there were people like me who fought through everything I had, who fought through not knowing which direction to go and not having anyone to go to ask, like, hey, is this something I should be doing? Like I said, I sort of joke that I was raised by wolves, and it can feel unfair. My dad's an alcoholic. Sometimes he's a great guy, but most of the time he's not. And I could go in and say, oh, life's not fair. And it's not. Life is not fair. So what can we do about it? And how can we respond when life is not fair? And believe it or not, lead us to exactly where it is we need to go, regardless of there being fairness. So first of all, let's just understand, like I said, life's not fair. That's universal. There are times that you've probably felt that something happened to you and you said, that's not fair. And maybe you worked hard and you didn't get recognized, or maybe you felt the effects of a random illness that you didn't do anything to bring on, some setback you didn't deserve. Maybe someone got a promotion that in the grand scheme of things you would have been great for, but that person knows the boss a little bit better than you do. Not fair. Someone had opportunity handed to them while you've had to fight for every inch. Those things will happen on and off. I will tell you the truth that some things happen and they are miraculous and amazing, and some things happen and it's devastating and harsh. And the truth is that in the end, nobody escapes unfairness. We all get different cards in life. We often are not the cards sometimes we would have chosen for ourselves. And even Epictetus, who was a Stoic thinker, said, we can't choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond. That wisdom has lasted for so many centuries, and it's true. Life's unfairness is universal, and how we respond to it is personal. We are the gatekeepers of what we put into our body, whether it's food, whether it's drink, whether it's information coming in through our eyeballs or our ears. We are the gatekeepers of that, and we are the gatekeepers of how we respond, what comes out of us, and that's the important part. The other thing that is really important to think about is that a lot of times we think life is unfair and it stings so much because we're comparing ourselves to other people, the success that they had, and think, well, why not me? Why not me? I see people skip ahead, to be honest, or people who got things that they did not work hard for, and yet I worked hard for things that I didn't see the end results of. And like I said, we can get pretty heated up about it, and then we're just still standing there waiting in line, wondering when it's going to be our turn. But the problem is that when we compare ourselves to other people, first of all, we don't see their behind-the-scenes struggles. We see our own struggles. We see the highlight reels of other people's lives. But you don't know what they've gone through, and you don't know what they've done, and you don't know what they did to maybe get into that position. And so sometimes when we measure our fairness compared to other people, we're not being fair either. Instead of asking, well, why not me? Or when's going to be my turn? Instead, we ask ourselves, what can I do so that I can go towards that direction right now? That's the small step we're looking for, the small step we can take. And then when you stop comparing yourself to other people, you can instead flip the switch on it. And instead of saying, that's not fair, what's one thing I can do today with the things that I've been given in life? And then take that focus, and instead of turning it into resentment, put it back on resilience. Like I said, I'm a Christian. I believe that there are lessons to be learned in everything. And so when there are times when we don't get what we want, when I was a kid, I just wanted two parents to pay attention to their child, to help me muddle through life's challenges. I just wanted a parent to be there for me. That's what and a puppy. I wanted a puppy too. Those are the things that I really wanted more than anything. And when I saw other people have those things, why not me? Why can't I have that? And maybe this is where I came out okay, is I started asking myself, I'm not going to get that. Clearly, my dad is not going to stop drinking within a reasonable amount of time in my childhood. And so that's when I started turning to books, going to the library, learning from other people about how I can go and get things that I need and want in my life, because I wasn't going to get it from where other people were going to get it. And there's nothing wrong with them getting it from their parents and having that. Clearly, a person having two parents that are deeply invested in your life, a mother and a father who care about their children, the best gift that anybody can have for sure. Doesn't mean we're done. It doesn't mean we're done. It doesn't mean we can't take responsibility for our lives. And that's when we do that. That's when our strengths are going to show up. That's when we are going to turn in, to that person that we're meant to be, that fighter that we're meant to be, so that we can start going after the things. We can't control everything in our lives, but we can control our responses and what we do with them. And when we show up, that's when we start heading into the right path. I think about Viktor Frankl. I read his books a while ago, and I did a podcast on it. You can find it in the podcast feed. But I think of the horrors he saw in the concentration camp and everything that he wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, a book that he wrote after he survived. And he said that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. And that is a man who was in a concentration camp. The worst possible situation you can be in, end of story. And that's what he said. You can choose your own attitude. Doesn't mean that it's easy. And it doesn't mean there isn't a burden of guilt placed on the people that put him there. It doesn't mean that it's fair. It doesn't mean anything about it. But what it does mean is we have the power that when unfairness hits us, instead of asking why me, try what now? What now? That small shift in your thinking can make all the difference in the world. And sometimes when it feels like life's kind of cruelest blows hit us, it's the very thing that ends up changing us to make us better, to make us stronger. I think about when I was a kid. Oh, how do I want to say this? Like I said, I just wanted parents to be there for me, to help me in these situations, to help me through situations. And quite honestly, the answer is they just weren't capable of that. Now as an adult, I understand they weren't even, they were barely adults themselves when they had me, and they just weren't capable of it. And again, I could feel unfair about it, but it turned me into someone stronger. I notice about myself that the years I get away from that situation, sometimes I have become more fragile in certain ways. Well, I was tough as nails as a kid. So anytime something came along, when we moved for high school and I went to a new town and I didn't know anybody, and this town was closely knit together. They were all related to each other. They all went to grade school together. And here I was, one of a handful of strangers that moved to that school district out of the blue. and I had to forge my own way. When I go to college, not knowing a soul and going into a brand new college in a brand new town, and this was a big college. This was a college that's hard to get into. When I had to get my first job, buy my first car, buy this house, these were all things I had to do, and quite honestly, it was the resilience I learned as a child that sharpened me into this person to be able to do each and every one of these things. And think about, like, if you lose a job, a lot of people look back at that and say, it's unfair. But I know from a lot of people in my life who have lost jobs, every single one of them will say years later, it was the best thing that happened to them. It was the push they needed. They started the business. They finally got a job they really enjoyed. And instead of looking at it as a rejection, they eventually could see it as an open door. It steers us to a brand new opportunity we couldn't imagine, that sometimes we would not have taken if we didn't get shoved out the door. Now, in my situations, I had jobs where I had to leave. One job was a great job. I loved the job, and then the company got sold and it became a terrible job. Then I got a job with that very, very hard company, and it taught me to be a better employee. It was awful from the point of view I was working 100 hours a week. My health went downhill because I was working so many hours, but it made me into a better employee. Then I got the nicer job I just left recently. I was there for 15 years. It gave me an occupation that I never dreamed I would love. And now I'm in that position where I can work for a hospital doing exactly what it is I love doing. It was all a broken, crisscrossy path that got me there, right? And sometimes we need that shove out the door. This last job change that I did 2 years ago was the first time that I ever changed jobs for Jill. I changed jobs because I was working too many hours. I changed job because the company became horrible. I changed jobs for all sorts of reasons in my past, but this is the first time I did it because it was going to be better for me. And so that's kind of interesting. It took a long time to get there. So unfairness doesn't always hide a silver lining, not every time, but oftentimes it will grow us in strength and patience and empathy for other people. And it's one of those gifts that it will last longer than any of the painful moment would have lasted. I think about that I had, let's just say that, I had to live 18 years in a situation that was very hard on me. And 14 of those years, I was a kid and I had no control over it. But the things I learned in those 14 years gave me the strength that when I went on past that time, I could go on and thrive. That's exactly it. I'm not wealthy. I'm not rich. I'm not, traveling on luxury liners or anything like that. But I'm happy. And I have pushed through so many things in my life to a place where I'm happy. I got stuff. I mean, I'm not saying stuff's it, but you know what I mean? I have the yarn I want. I got toys. I have a happy life. My life is very happy. And it was all because I had those tough times that taught me how to push through. The next thing to remember is that you have to build your own measure of success. The idea is that we often look at other people's scoreboards, whether it's money, whether it's the amount of children and family that they have. We look at other people's lives and we think about success and, unfortunately, sometimes in numbers and in vacations. And I wanted kids. I wanted to marry and I wanted to have kids and I wanted to have a big family, and it didn't happen for me. So I could crawl up in a ball and say it was unfair and that, I always kind of laughed about it because I was the kind of girl who loved football, who loved playing video games. I loved going out and being hiking and in nature. And I thought, guys will like that because I like doing a lot of guy-like things. Guys will like that. And I never found the right guy, essentially that it. And I see other people who, like in college, I just remember women who were just horrible to the men that they were with, very demanding and unkind. And I thought I would be kind. I would be nice to them. Why do they have someone who's so great like that guy and I don't, and I could have wallowed my way through that. Or I could have looked at people who went on to make more money, had more success. Originally, I wanted to be an astronomer. I see people in the world around me who are astronomers. And I could have gone that direction or this direction or whichever way. But you know what? I think we have to come up with our own scoreboards. Because when we look at other people's scores, we might get envious, but it's not going to make us better, and it's not going to make us happier or even give us the kind of success that we think we want. Maybe like I said, right now, I have time to go hiking on a Saturday. I have time to have this podcast empire that Allison from podfeet.com got me started in 5 years ago. Maybe I have time to do something else that work. Like I said, I'm a Christian. I have more time to work on faith issues than a person who has married with lots of kids. I have opportunities because of the way my life is to do different things for different people. And so the idea is maybe we measure ourselves in kindness. We measure ourselves in helping other people. We measure ourselves in sharing our knowledge with other people, something like that. But the idea is if you're trying to think of a small step, write down your own scoreboard. What does success mean for you in your life with your values? How do you not measure yourself against other people? It changed for me. I became a Christian when I was in college. And so now when I look at success, I look at it something entirely different. And that is something that changed in me over the course of, the last few decades. So you have to come up with your own measurements of what it is. I think the Bible gives some very clear measures of success. And so if you're interested in that, that's one way to look at it. But when you measure yourself against other people, you're just going to be feeling more and more like life isn't fair. And in the end, life isn't fair. And that's not the worst news of all, because what it means is if we keep waiting for fairness to show up at our door, if we keep waiting to be happy or fulfilled or successful, the truth of it is we can start now by focusing on what we can control, what we can let go of, what we can hold on to, where we find meaning in hard moments and in good moments, and building our own scoreboard. You know what? Life may not be fair, but that doesn't mean that you can't win. That doesn't mean that you are in a dead-end spot. So, first of all, if you find yourself in a spot where you're lamenting that life isn't fair, first of all, it's not a weakness to admit and just say it. You know what? This feels so unfair. And you'll have a friend. I have a friend who would be like, oh, Jill, I know it's not fair. I'm sorry, it stinks. And sometimes when you name something as unfair or hurtful in that, it can be a first step. If you let it be, of you moving on. Now you know something that kind of hurt you to the core. What can you do about it? Then separate out what you can control and not control. I did a whole thing about how the Alcoholics Anonymous, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can. Right now, I put everything in 2 buckets. What can I control and what can't I control? Did a whole show on that. But figure that out. What can you control? Maybe draw 2 circles on a piece of paper and write down what it is. And then focus all your energy on the things you can control. I always talk, to people who get very sad around election times. And to me, the idea is, did you do everything that you could control? You can't control the national temperament. You can't control what other people think. But what you can control is what you do. How you vote, how you donate money, do you volunteer? And if you've done everything that you can do, that's what you do. That's what you can do in every situation. Again, shift from the why me to what now. Make tiny steps, a small plan where you can start going through your goal step by step. I remember talking to a person who wanted to be a movie producer. That was his end goal. That's hard. We live in the middle of the North Woods. We're far away from Hollywood and the movie industry, but what can you do? You take small steps. You maybe go to a charity and you work on a film production for them for their next advertisement or for a documentary about what they do so that they can share that to donors. And you work your way up. step by step, right? There's steps you can take, and every step you go, make the next plan, reach out, look for help, reframe your goal, and restore the agency in your own life that you have that kind of control. The next part of it is to reframe this unfairness as fuel. Use the sting, I guess, of unfairness as motivation. You see people who are like that. When they have setbacks, it drives them to go even further. I saw a moment of resilience today where someone had the hardest setback a person can have in the loss of a spouse. And what she said is, we're going on, we're continuing, we're going to keep going with that same vision. Took back agency in her own life and took those setbacks to be her driving force. Think about it like an athlete too, who gets, I used to be a softball player and I was pretty good at it until basically all the other kids got better at it. And I just didn't have the physical health to stay there. I became a softball manager and then eventually a basketball manager. And eventually I wrote software for our state basketball system so that we could keep statistics and run easy reports. It's basically what got me into the computer world. So me being cut from a team led to a lifetime of loving computers. The next step, and I think that this is important to say, is to, they talk about practicing gratitude, and I don't like buzzwords. But what it doesn't mean is that you're not going to erase unfairness. But what you're going to do is you're going to think about the things that you're grateful for, the gifts you've been given, the lessons you've been given, the emotional resilience that you've been given. And just doing that can, change your emotional baseline. I am grateful to God. And so when I look at the things that God gave me, it gives me strength to go and take that next step again. Lean on the community you have. In times, like I said, of unfairness, you don't have to be alone. Share with a friend. If you have a mentor, if you have someone who's a community leader or a pastor or a community center person, share in that person and see what we can work out together as a plan. We're not meant to go in this life alone. And you're not going to fix the unfairness, but you can lighten the load and come up with a new direction. The next part is like I said, redefine success. Build your own scoreboard. Don't look at other people's scoreboards, but decide on what you value the most. Peace and creativity and kindness, family impact, friends impact, your community impact. There's so many things that you can do that are impactful in life that aren't on other people's scoreboards. And then just remember that in the whole history of things, unfairness is not hopelessness. We've seen many, if you read history, I'm a history buff, great figures in history faced deeply unfair circumstances, grew up in terrible situations, worse than my own, poverty, discrimination, illness, and yet left us legacies of courage, wisdom, hope. And so just remember, just because there's unfairness doesn't mean something powerful isn't going to happen. And I highly suggest reading biographies of other people or autobiographies. If you look through people who just faced the worst things in life and how they came through it, it will help you too. So it's something that can go through that particular piece. Just remember, in the end, Stoics believed that unfairness was the natural order of things. They thought of fate. They thought of that's just the way the world was. Rich people are born rich and poor people are born poor. Some people live long lives and other people short lives. And life distributes cards unevenly. And they felt that it's not a plot. It's just reality. It's just the way that it is. And so when you go through that, you go through and you make it your own. Again, Epictetus, who was born a slave and ended up finding his own Stoic school, says, don't demand things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do and then go on as well. Means we don't like unfairness, but we accept it as just being the part of life. Realize that you have control over some things and not control over other things. What's in your control? Your thoughts, your choices, your actions. What's not in control? Other people's behaviors, their wealth, their fame, their health, random events that happen, good or bad. Whenever life feels unfair, focus on that first category. What can you do? What can you think? What can you let into your body? And then, Stoics always sought true good. And as a Christian, I seek true good as well. The only thing that can't be taken from you is your character. Money, reputation, health, they're all externals that can go away. But they're not the foundation also of happiness. Instead, go for true success. Go for truth, virtue. Nothing can be robbed of you when you have courage and justice and self-control and wisdom. All of that will always be on your side. And again, when you think about it and you think about these things that go wrong in your life, think of it as training. Marcus Aurelius, who is a philosopher, emperor, I think he was in the movie Gladiator, he wrote a book called Meditations, which is a fantastic book. He said that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in our way becomes the way, meaning that when we have obstacles and unfairness that aren't just setbacks, they are the material we use to practice resilience, strength, and they become the way, the actual path. Think about it like this. When you lift heavy weights, what happens? You get stronger and you can lift other heavy weights, right? It goes on to make you stronger. And again, like I said, my perspective is looking at a view from above. The Stoics looked at it and they saw all of humanity, the fairness, the unfairness, and just realized that, there's a sweep of history that goes on, that we are part of a bigger something or other. But mine comes from the view from above, comes from the view of God. And I'm always going to try to frame everything that goes in my life in that same view, whatever struggles are happening. So again, life is unfair. What's in my control? What can I control? What virtue can I practice here? Patience, courage, strength, resilience. And again, think about unfairness as your sparring partner. So I hope that helps in all of this. Paul echoed the Stoic when he commented that the idea that we get contentment in all circumstances. That doesn't mean happiness. That doesn't mean anything but contentment in every circumstance. And that's the thing that I'm going for. So I appreciate you being here. If there's anything that you have to say to me or you want to comment on, you can put comments here in the channel. You can email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. I'm so glad you're here and out there and listening. This has been an adventure for me. I would love you to say that just this last year of losing weight, now we're at 72 pounds, an adventure. But in the bigger scheme of things, 2 years where I took this job for the first time and advanced my life just so I could be happier and have a better future. That was the first choice I ended up making just for me. It can happen, and it can happen for me, and it can happen for you too. Thanks so much and have a great day.